everybody now safely back in the fold. We've got Cedric Vasseur on the front end of this group for Cofidis. We're around about 40 kilometres to go. It's been a very difficult start. This is the 96th Milan San Remo, a total distance of 294 kilometres. Big news really before the start was the non-participation of Robbie McEwen, and I suppose for the American audience, Bob, George Hincapie not coming out. With Discovery Channel also losing Max van Heeswijk, it's going to make it a very difficult day for them to do something special.
A very tough overnight revelation from the Discovery team that George Hincapie will not be able to start this year's Milan San Remo. Bronchial infection, and in the springtime you never can tell, and it's been an exceptionally freezing cold spring so far in Northern Europe. Finally, we have a decent couple of days of racing towards the end of Paris-Nice, and of course today on Milano San Remo. There's Cedric Vasseur, the tall Frenchman on the Cofidis squad. But bad news for Discovery team, George Hincapie, probably their favorite son to win an event like this, a very long classic race, was unable to start today.
Well, 25 teams did start, all the members of the Pro Tour circuit, plus Acqua Saponi, the LPR team from Italy, Natrino, Panaria, and Team Barlow World from South Africa. Very cold at the start at around about 12 degrees Celsius, but along the coast here it really has been a reflection of springtime because it's hovering at 20 degrees Celsius, which is just inside of 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The big favourites have got to be Oscar Freire, Alessandro Patacchi, and of course the young Belgian rider Tom Boonen. Looking here at a little tickle off the front. We're trying to see one or two riders. To me, Bob, this has always been the real start of the bike race. We've been over the Col de Turcino at 144 kilometres covered. We've just been over the Capo Melle, and right now we're on the early slopes here of the Capo Berta, which leaves us 3 big climbs to go before the finish, the Cipressa and the final climb of the day, which will be the Poggio, the summit of which is just at 4 kilometres to go.
Little attack there coming from Valerio Agnoli, and that's a nice little move there, but perhaps a little bit too far away from the finish line. After the top of this, like you said, there's still 2 very tough climbs, the Cipressa and the Poggio, and generally speaking that's where Milano San Remo unfolds. The Poggio, a steep climb, not long, but so very close to the finish line you have to race near the front there.
Well, you do, and I think the difficult thing about trying to escape from Milan San Remo this year is the fact that in my book there are around about 10 very good sprinters who've got a chance of winning this race. So I do believe all of the top teams will try and keep it together, even on the slopes of the Poggio. And we were trying to figure out, was there anybody who was strong enough to attack on the Cipressa and survive all the way to the finish? I really don't think that a man like Paolo Bettini, who was probably the only man whose name you could think about would do that, has the form this season.
So far this year he's been dogged by a couple of recent illnesses, respiratory tract infection he had a few weeks ago. You see a nice little poster there for Mirko Celestino, a big winner in Italian cycling, and maybe that's his fan club there. Paolo Bettini does have the power to break away, but so far this year he really hasn't had the form.
I think team orders have got to be for the Quick Step team this afternoon, all for one, and all for a man by the name of Tom Boonen, who was very dominant in the early part of this season in Paris-Nice. So we're looking here at a compact peloton, Gruppo Compacto. It's still all of the big sprinters in with a chance of the win at Milan San Remo. Team Panaria on the front here in the orange jerseys. They will be thinking about the possibility of getting themselves down towards the finish line. But Discovery Channel have been a little bit absent at the front end of this group. You can see the dark blue jerseys there of Team Liberty Seguros. And if you want to throw an outsider's name into the bag, Bob, you've got to think about Alan Davis, the Australian rider, who's been racing since the Tour Down Under in January, and says he's actually fixed in his mind since he started training back in November, one thing, one rendezvous, Milano San Remo.
It is an absolutely glorious bike race. The first big race of the year, 300 kilometers when you count the neutral section through the streets of Milan. Goes from the industrial city, the industrial capital of Italy, Milano, all the way through the hills to the coastline, and then a glorious run-in to the beautiful Costa Azzurra and the town of San Remo.
Well, let's just put that 300 kilometers back into old money, because that is 186 miles. It really is an unbelievable race. These guys have already been in the saddle for around about 6.5 hours in this, which is a very old event. It first started back in 1907. And just to remind ourselves, this is the 96th edition. It was interrupted a couple of times during the First and Second World Wars, but since then it has always taken place. And it's basically almost exactly the same race route as it was when Bob and I raced back in the 1980s, because the Cipressa was only introduced back in 1982, and that was to try and break the race up and prevent the sprinters all coming together in the Via Roma. It succeeded for a couple of seasons, but since then it really hasn't had very much effect on the main field.
You have to have a very fast average speed for the breakaway specialist to have a chance to get away from the sprinters. I've calculated over the years that around about 44 kilometers an hour is the magic average speed. Below that, usually it's the sprinters that have a chance to win, but anything above that, and the chances for a breakaway are much more improved, and that's how Paolo Bettini won the race a couple of years ago.
Well, you're right, that was in 2003, and the average speed on that occasion was 44.5 kilometers an hour. He did have the advantage of having a teammate in that breakaway with him on that occasion, and that was a big charge down to the line. Looking down here, the lime green jerseys, we haven't seen an awful lot of those since the start of this season, but that is the brand new team, Liggett, the team of Mario Cipollini. Number one there, just catching his way through. There's Alessandro Patacchi moving forward as well. Number one in that white jersey, and it's the first time we've actually had a chance to see the leader of the World Pro Tour jersey. And Bob, I feel it a little bit disappointing that that jersey outranks the World Champions jersey.
Yes, the rainbow stripes of the World Champions jersey is the jersey the riders usually want to wear day in and day out. After you've won the world title, you get to wear that jersey for a full year. Unless, of course, you're leading the Pro Tour, which is brand new this year. So Oscar Freire didn't make any bones about his disappointment in not being able to wear the World Champion stripes as he goes down to try to defend his title in Milan San Remo. He's still leading the World Pro Tour, and that's not a bad consolation prize by any stretch of the imagination.
I think probably the most dangerous thing about... Oh, there's a crash. I was just going to mention, Bob, crashes, because that is the most dangerous thing with Milano San Remo. You ride for 300 kilometers, you're on the brakes all of the time, and this crash, fortunately, is close to the rear end of the main field, because you can see the team cars are right up there at the back. And this is something every bike rider fears, especially now. And there's the Italian champion there, Moreni, on the side of the road. He's gone down very hard indeed. This has robbed a number of riders over the years of a very good season, because the crashes here are really difficult.
Absolute disaster here on the sides of the road. There's a T-Mobile rider also down. Christian Marini we saw earlier down. Discovery team rider also on the ground. Aqua Sapone. So the helicopters are right overhead. The streets are very narrow. Everybody wants to be at the front, and when there is a crash, it's usually a huge pileup. And now we see there are just about 50 riders into it, just touching the cars there. And of course, the road gets covered with cyclists. You can't get through. An absolutely graphic illustration of why it's so important to stay at the very front of the bike race.
I can't believe that, Bob. I was just about to start talking about crashes. That's Leif Hoster, by the way, from Discovery Channel, just on the left-hand side, who's gone down. It's all down and out there for Christian Moreni. He won't be getting back into this bike race at all. I'd like to see who the telecom rider was, because it didn't look very much as if it was Eric Zabel. Good to see that Mario Cipollini made it to the front end of the bike race. In fact, that looks like Zabel there, Bob, just at the top of the picture. Now, that would be a blow for telecom.
Absolute disaster for T-Mobile if their man, Eric Zabel, who's won this event 4 times, were to be caught in that crash. It was fairly close to the front, right about midway through, and you can see what kind of damage it had done to the peloton. If that is indeed Eric Zabel, his day is over.
Well, it is, because we're now looking at around about 2 or 3 kilometers to that nasty right-hand turn, which takes the riders to the start of that very difficult climb, the Cipressa. It's a long climb. It's probably one of the longest on the final 40 kilometers, going up for around about 4 kilometers. Just on the right-hand side, you can see moving to the front, Kim Kierken. I wish I could have identified that rider from T-Mobile, and let's hope that it certainly wasn't the man who's won this race on 4 occasions, Eric Zabel. Well, still at the back end of the group, these riders will not be seeing Milan San Remo in the main field, because that was a very nasty crash. It happened at around about 50th place, and I'm sure one man, Bob, was thinking about that, Eric Decker. You know, a couple of years ago, a nasty crash here in Milan San Remo actually robbed his season, because he broke his leg right up at the top of the femur, and it was not a very good break, and it took him a long time to get back onto the bike. Having a look down there, the cars are not yet behind, but it seems as if 1 or 2 riders have managed to catch up to the main field. But that crash, once again, as we go out of the town of Imperia, has had a serious effect on the constitution of the peloton.
And you can see the stragglers now that were caught behind that, trying to come back to the front. T-Mobile going back, looking for their leader, Eric Zabel, and it might be a while before they see him again. This is a very big group. They're only about 15 or 20 seconds behind the peloton, so they should be catching up in good order. The problem is the difficulties start just thereafter, and they're going to go over the Cipressa, and this is the worst possible place to start. And that looks like perhaps it might be Alejandro Valverde, one of the pre-race favorites, also caught behind in that crash.
Yep, that won't be good either. He was one of my tips for a win here this afternoon. He's a very experienced. There's Freddie Rodriguez as well, I think, up to the front end of the group. So a lot of big names actually did go down in that crash, Bob, and you can see this is the second group trying to come up here and make contact. And this is a very difficult place to actually have an incident, because very shortly they'll be on the early slopes of the Cipressa, and really that's difficult to come back into the race. Baleares. This is the second race on the road here. I think we're looking here at the back end of the split. The race referees are in there very quickly. Stuart O'Grady did not get caught out at all there, because O'Grady as well is at the front end of the group. So that's the second group. As we swing up there, that's a gap, Bob, I would say, of around about 25 seconds. This is the leading group. I would say still around about 85 riders, and very much Team Rabobank on the front. So we're coming now to 30 kilometers or 18 miles to go to the finish. This is the moment when you really do have to start to get that little bit nervous and try and ride in the first 15 or 20 places. Just have a look at this again. That's how that crash happened. There was absolutely nowhere to go for most of those riders.
Touch of the handlebars there, the two riders, one of them from Liquigas, the other from T-Mobile. Everyone's trying to move up. Everyone gets nervous. Everyone knows that if you get behind, and there's Thor Hushovd, we can see the Norwegian champion on the Crédit Agricole team, one of the early pre-race favorites. He was also caught there. An absolute disaster. And just like that, just that quickly, your chances can be erased. In the classics, it's just one day, and there's no catching up at that point.
Well, at this speed, we've seen the average speed of this race hovering at around about 39 kilometers an hour since the start, but they will now be pushing the average speed on the clock to close to 45 kilometers an hour. And to actually close down that 25-second gap is very difficult. Green and white on the front end of the chasers, that will be Crédit Agricole. They're obviously trying to pace their Norwegian champion Thor Hushovd back into the main field, but again, that gap, Bob, is very much stabilized, and if they don't catch before the bottom of the Cipressa, they'll never see the front again.
Probably not, and you can see that the riders in the front are not waiting around. Oscar Freire right there in second position with his teammate from Rabobank at the front, making a very fast tempo, and it makes the chase group have a lot more work to do to come back in. And then, of course, even if you do catch up, you have to fight your way through the front of the group to get back to the front. Inseguitori, that is the followers, and Ies Baleares rider there, trying to catch up to the front of the bike race before they get to the second to last climb, the Cipressa, before, of course, the Poggio, the very last climb before the finish in San Remo.
Well, Jose Luis Arrieta is in this group. I didn't see Valverde, so Valverde may well have managed to survive that little crash at the back. So, as we head down now towards the Cipressa, it really is going to be difficult for these men to reintegrate the peloton. Still looking down on group number 2, separated by the main field by around about 30 seconds. Looking now to see where the front end of the peloton is, and I have to say, Bob, I have a feeling that T-Mobile may not have lost Eric Zabel in that crash, because they're getting themselves pretty organized. This is going to be almost like the charge of a bunch sprint, because it's so important to go around this right-hand corner in the first 10 or 15 places. The pink jerseys are T-Mobile. Looking a little bit further back, this will probably be the chase group, because there's no way the motorbike will be allowed to get this close to the front end of the peloton just before the Cipressa.
The Cipressa is a very tough climb, probably the hardest of the whole race course. It comes after so many hours of racing that the legs are full of lactic acid at this point, and it's the riders that can rotate to the front, have a lot of power, and a tremendous amount of endurance to be able to get to the end of 300 kilometers with still some energy enough to win the great classic of Milano San Remo.
Well, the referees obviously don't think there's going to be a junction here, because as we look here at Maschiarelli, and I'm not quite sure why we're following Maschiarelli, because he's trying to actually catch up to the main field. You can see them allowing the team cars by one at a time, and that's an indication that the gap has actually stretched from the 30-second to probably around about 45-second margin. Normally they don't let them come by until the 1-minute mark, but just as we go around this next section of corners, we'll start the Cipressa, and I think we already have.
Right there on the very initial slopes, you see Kim Kirchen, who's having a very good season so far. He's the champion of Luxembourg. On his wheel, Eric Decker, the champion of Holland on the Rabobank squad. Kim Kirchen will be working for of course, Alessandro Petacchi, who has promised finally to win this great classic Milano San Remo, the biggest one-day race in Italy of the year, and Petacchi would love to finally tick that off on his results calendar.
Well, he's had 11 wins so far this season, absolutely dominant since he started racing in February. It's good to see Eric Decker, and I think he probably thought back a little while but to that accident he had some time ago. Decker riding fairly well. You do have to survive at the front end of this group. There's Oscar Freire and Alessandro Petacchi and Eric Zabel. Well, I'm glad it wasn't Eric Zabel, because I'm a great supporter and have been over the last few years of Eric Zabel. There's Stuart O'Grady, 171 in the lime green there. Mario Cipollini. Cipollini did not like it when the organisers put this climb in. He reckoned it was a race to destroy the sprinters' chances of winning Milan San Remo, but he was able to win this race back in 2002 ahead of a certain American by the name of Freddie Rodriguez, who we hope is going to fly the flag this afternoon, although I did think I saw Rodriguez involved in that crash. But we're looking down anyway to see if we can see the stars and stripes. As long as we get a helicopter shot, we may well catch a chance of seeing if Fast Freddy's in there.
Davide Rebellin there from the Gerald Steiner squad. I do believe I saw Freddie Rodriguez still in the front group, still being able to contend. He got second place a couple of years ago, 2002, when Mario Cipollini won. Best finish for an American, you have to look way back to Greg LeMond in 1985 when he got second to the great Sean Kelly. There's Petacchi right there, and there is Eric Zabel just on his wheel, so they have him listed as Alexander Vinokurov, but I think they might have mistaken that. That's most certainly
no,
not.
243 there is Alexander Vinokurov up to the right. In front of him is Matthias Kessler, and then 248 there, in fact, is Eric Zabel. Looking pretty comfortable and relaxed. He's got so much experience in a bike race like this, and I think, Bob, at the end of the day, there's Thor Hushoff. So he's actually done a brilliant ride to come across there and make contact. And I think, yes, you just caught a very quick glimpse there of Fast Freddie Rodriguez, the American champion.
Second place in Milan San Remo in 02. Greg LeMond, second place. The best American finishes. And Luca Mazzanti there from Ceramica Panaria has done a little bit of an attack there off the front. So Mazzanti is giving his chance right now on the Cipressa climb.
Well, it's a long climb. It climbs up to a maximum altitude of 240 meters, which doesn't really sound very much. That's around about 750 feet. But after 6.5 hours in the saddle, this climb really hurts. The important thing, I suspect, for the main sprinters who want to win this race is not to panic at a time like this. But the guys who can't sprint are trying to launch attacks, and that looks again as if it's a rider from Team Phonak.
Team Phonak now putting in an attack to bridge up to Manzante, who you can see just at the top of your screen in the orange jersey from Ceramica Panaria. And that's a good little attack. I saw Johnny Bugno win this race one time with an attack on the Cipressa, but it's still a ways to go to the finish, and it's very tough to stay out of the front of a charging peloton all by yourself, even though there are a couple of pretty steep, stiff hills before the finish line.
Rabobank not panicking, controlling the front end of the main field. Zabel looking very confident. All of the main sprinters, I think, were at the front end of this group. Stuart O'Grady is here. You can just spot him there. And there's the British national champion as well for Discovery Channel, just on the left-hand side, Roger Hammond. On the slopes of the Cipressa, just two riders scurrying off the front end of the main field now. The main field very much controlled here by Team Rabobank. Let's not forget the man who rides for Team Rabobank is the defending champion in this event, Oscar Freire, and of course Oscar Freire, the leader of the new World Pro Tour. The advantage there of Mazzanti is around about 10 seconds, but it's only a couple more meters, Bob, back to the main field.
He doesn't have to look very far down the road to see the charging peloton being led by Jan Boven, the teammate of Oscar Freire, the defending champion and current leader of the Pro Tour. Rabobank controlling the race. Here comes some attacks now from Saunier Duval, and now you can see what happens when a climb is thrown into the finale of a bike race. There's Eric Zabel from T-Mobile. Everyone thinks it's their chance to move, and the attacks start thick and fast, and that's what we're seeing right now.
I was actually just going to mention Oscar Pereira, but maybe I didn't need to, because I think next time we pull back and see the front end of the main field, he will have been caught by that massive acceleration. Just looking there, Alejandro Valverde. This young man is just 24 years of age, and the Spanish do believe that he's going to be the next top man, and I don't think he'll be too far away from the win at the end of today. Now then, this looks like the shape of Casagrande trying to go off the front here for Saunier Duval. Not surprisingly that he's attacking, Bob, a long way from the finish.
Well, he needs the hills. He's not a sprinter by any stretch of the imagination. He needs a little bit harder hills than these, and you can can see the peloton just closing down to Francesco Casagrande, who's put in a solid attack on the Cipressa with the Saunier Duval rider and the two riders that were already up front. There you can see Casagrande, great bike racer, one of the stalwarts of Italian cycling and a solid veteran, but I don't think he has the legs for an event like this especially.
Well, you really do need a lot of miles. He's got his teammate up there as well, Zabaya. Now, that's rather a dangerous move if they give Zabaya an advantage over the front end of the peloton, but you can see the reaction coming here thick and fast on the slopes of the climb of La Cipressa, which, as we said earlier, was introduced into this race back in 1982. The Poggio, by the way, was introduced back in 1960. And again, it was to try and split up the field before the end, and that's something they never really have managed to do, because somehow or another the sprinters are always managed to be able to drag their bodies over these climbs that the organisation have thrown at them. Gruppo Compacto, they would say in Italy. It's now all back together, around about 1.5 kilometres, Bob, to the summit of this climb.
A few more twists and turns of the Cipressa before they get over the top, and then it is a screaming descent back down to the coast, and one more right-hand corner to go over the Poggio, and then it's only, I think, about 1.5 km from the bottom of the Poggio to the finish line, so you really have to watch your position and stay near the front. Paolo Tiralongo from Ceramica Panaria going off the front now, and it looks to be a Naturino rider on his wheel, another Italian.
I've always thought that was a great name for a bike rider, Tiralongo. It means doing a long turn at the front, and it's still, in fact, Casagrande staying in contact there. When you come around that corner, that looked a little bit precarious, I have to say. These men on their motorbikes do an absolutely fabulous job of bringing us some of the best photographs and the best. There's Freddie Rodriguez. Looks like he's got it in reverse gear there, but he's still at the front with all the top names.
Valverde there, a little replay going around that corner. You can tell the speed. You have to slow down for a hairpin bend on a climb. You know that you're going very quickly indeed. There's Casagrande, Freddie Rodriguez right there on the shoulder of Oscar Freire. So Freddie Rodriguez so far is riding a great Milan San Remo, staying out of trouble right in front of the bike race. Normally perhaps he'd be the lead-out man for Robbie McEwen, but Robbie McEwen didn't start this morning. So Freddie Rodriguez is now free to take his chance in Milan San Remo, try to improve one placing on what he did in 2002 when he got second to the great Mario Cipollini.
Well, in fact, talking to Freddie Rodriguez before the start, he said the big problem that he had when he finished second was he was under-geared. He didn't have that extra gear to accelerate over the last few meters behind Mario Cipollini. Today, he's actually taken the precaution of putting a larger chainring on the front. For the aficionados, he's actually put a 54-tooth chainring on the front. And if he clicks that into the 11-tooth sprocket, well, Bob, I don't have that power anymore.
I don't think I ever had that kind of power, even when I was a young man. There's Tiralongo on the front. So if Freddie Rodriguez can turn that gear, he will be going very fast towards the finish line.
Certainly will, and let's hope that he can wave the flag for the United States. This is looking a little bit further back to see what's going on here. Just coming up through there. That was rather interesting to see the Lampre riders trying to reintegrate the back end of the main field, and that Lampre rider, in fact, was none other than Salvatore Commesso. Alejandro Valverde is the big favourite for the Il Baleares team. This is him now wearing number 148. Very good start to the season. He's been pretty dominant along with riders like Alessandro Petacchi and, of course, Tom Boonen. Again, another attack here coming off the front. So these guys from Team Panaria, they don't have their big sprinters like Graham Brown, but this young man is a very brilliant climber, Emanuele Selle. Remember him last year in the Giro d'Italia? We'd never heard of him before until he won himself a stage.
He won a great stage. Here's a replay of Selle's attack. A fantastic day-long solo he made on that stage of the Giro d'Italia. And I don't think he got very much more of a time gap than what he has right now, just a few meters, but he was able to keep the peloton at bay throughout the whole stage and won a great win in the Giro d'Italia last summer.
Well, that was nasty weather conditions. It was exceptionally hot. Today is probably the first day of springtime throughout the whole of Europe, I would say, but especially here at La Primavera, the first day of spring. Looking at the back end of the main field, get a chance to see just how precarious it is, but Bob, once you go down this descent, it is a very tricky descent off the summit of the Cipressa, and I do remember as you go into this town here at the top, you see just how narrow it is. It was on this descent really that one great one-day classics rider really ended his career, and it was on that corner there at 20 kilometers to go that Jan Raas actually, while in the front group, went over the top of that barrier and did some serious injury to his back. He was never the same again. And
This is a very dangerous descent. Lots of hairpins very quickly, and all the riders trying to protect their position because it's just a short little stretch of kilometers on the flats where you could conceivably move up before the last climb of the day, the Poggio. So all of the riders desperate to stay in the front of the bike race. We see a very fast descent being put in by a rider just in front of the Fossa Bortolo squad. Now they will be doing all the work they have to do to bring Alessandro Petacchi to the front. Mirko Celestino second when Bettini won a couple of years ago. Absolutely crazy fast descent that he's going on right now, and let's hope that he knows this descent well and won't come to grief on any of these hairpin corners.
Technical descent. In fact, you as a very good motorbike rider know that it's very difficult for the motorbike riders to actually get around the corners as fast as these bike riders. He's just ejected his bottle there. He's looking now at being inside of the final 20 kilometers. He's got about 2 meters 50 advantage off the front end of the main field, and Alessandro Petacchi's boys are not letting anything go.
Well, this is great images from the motorbike rider, but he most certainly should not be there, and he's trying desperately to get around the cyclist, but they're having a very hard time getting the camera motorbike out of the middle of the peloton. There's only 5 guys in front of him. They've gone back up to the helicopter, so the camera motorbike is about 10th position on the road, and the rest of the field is trying to get around him to have a safe descent of the Cipressa.
It could be that he's looking for World Pro Tour points here this afternoon, because he's actually dropping back through the main field. It is very difficult for the motorbike to stay out of danger, and you have to have a very special pilot on the front end of that machine to keep him out of contact with the riders. It's still Celestino trying to keep his advantage, but he's really just setting the pace for everybody else, because nobody yet has split off the front end of the main field. As we look down here on Celestino, finished second to Paolo Bettini, but just ahead of Luca Paolini as they go around that corner, Bob. It really is a fast and tricky descent, only beaten. That's Bettini there. Now he's being very attentive, and he's the man, let's not forget, who was the last winner, I suppose we have to say, of the World Cup, which was a series of races which linked together all the one-day races in the world, but has now been combined into this brand new idea of the International Cycling Union called the World Pro Tour.
Bettini there in a gold helmet and gold shoes to commemorate his gold medal at the Athens Olympics this past summer. He's come here promising to work for Tom Boonen, who you can see just coming into your screen there. That looks like Alexander Vinokourov. A little bit of a gap. Now that was caused by the motorcycle on the descent of the Cipressa. The Fossa Bortolo riders, of course, they'll wait. Bettini will wait for Tom Boonen, and the rest of the group should come back in together. And there you can see big Tom Boonen there. That's on the wheel of Alexander Vinokourov. The camera motorcycle, I must say, caused this gap right now, and not a fault of the racers at all, but now it's all come back together. Boonen slipping off to the front, and there goes Bettini with an attack.
Well, you know, Bettini has a lot of responsibility to the team, and if it comes to the bottom of the Poggio together, Bettini will have to ride for Tom Boonen, and I think he's decided here, Bob, I think I'll try it on my own for a change.
He's giving it a go here between the Cipressa and the Poggio. This will be a desperate chase come through from the peloton behind if they hear that Paolo Bettini is off the front by himself.
Alexander Vinokourov just doing the sporting thing there of throwing Tom Boonen back into contact. Sort of illegal, but I don't think the judges will do anything about it, because that was a very sportsman-like move here. There's a rider trying to come across here. This is a very nice move here by Grady Agricole. Now, Grady Agricole, one of the teams that I was a bit surprised at getting the selection here. It looks like Kashevkin, who is the Kazakhstan rider on Grady Agricole, trying to get across the gap. And Bob, I tell you what, that descent has actually split the race up quite dramatically.
There's Bettini in the front, still holding on, and the Grady Agricole rider coming across to form 2 men in the front. A lot of attacks. There's Bettini's attack going off the front just at the bottom of the Cipressa. They have 3 or 4 kilometers of flat roads along the coast before they hit Idlin for the last climb of the day, the Poggio. A little bit of confusion on the front of the peloton right now. Not a very good chase coming on, not very well organized, and there's Bettini just up the road.
But look at that armada of motorbikes all the way round Paolo Bettini here, and he's actually going to try and take advantage of those. He'll get sucked along just a fraction here. This is a very difficult thing to do, but a very clever tactical move. Everybody expected at the Olympic Games in Athens for the break to come on the final circuit of the race, but no, Paolo Bettini says forget about that, everybody will be watching for it, so I'll go with 2 laps to go. Everyone was thinking about the attack on the Poggio, nobody was thinking about an attack on the descent. So Paolo Bettini is now charging away with a slight advantage over the front end of the main field, and he may well have just surprised the sprinters. looking down here on the main field, I would think there'd be a certain amount of panic on board Fassa Bortolo. They've got the organisation and they have the power to chase back the breakaway, because Paolo Bettini is still surviving on the front end of this bike race. But I tell you what, after 12 kilometres of flat and then hitting the Poggio, it's almost like the man with the hammer smacking you in the face, Bob.
Yes, absolutely. Kashekin on the front, very strong bike racer from Kazakhstan on the Credit Agricole squad. It's come together with Paolo Bettini, and they're trying to steal this race away from the sprinters, which of course are being led by the Fassa Bortolo squad. There's Mario Cipollini, there's the Gerald Steiner squad. They have Danilo Hondo, a very fast man. You see the front, all Fassa Bortolo, and there's Alessandro Patacchi, probably the fastest man in cycling today. Would love for this to come back together and have a chance to sprint on the Via Roma in San Remo.
Well, they haven't got it under control yet, because these two leaders have around about a 15-second advantage over the front end of the peloton. Now, what Fassa Bortolo have to do, Bob, is control the pacemaking and catch these riders at around about the corner before the start of the Poggio. There you get it. Confirmation is it's actually 16 seconds, so that wasn't a bad guess, was it?
Very courageous move by Paolo Bettini. He won this race before in a similar fashion. He had a couple of guys to go with him, then Luca Paolini. This is 2 years ago now, and Mirko Celestino. Of course, Paolini did an incredible job on the slopes of the Poggio, allowing Bettini just to roll through on a regular basis, not kill himself, and have enough energy left for the sprint. There is Oscar Freire, our defending champion of Milano San Remo, #1. Also the current world champion, and he just finished a great stage race in Italy, the Tirreno Adriatico, where he won 3 stages and the overall. So Oscar Freire is in great form. Watch for his teammates from Rabobank to start working together at the front of the race with the Fassa Bortolo squad.
And Danilo Hondo there too, wearing number 132. Bob, this is a very brave move, and I think they're now starting to kick it just a fraction into overdrive, and Paolo Bettini is probably very happy to have the presence here of this man from the Credit Agricole, the Kazakh rider Kashekin. These two riders have really got to go do or die, because once they get caught, they will not have any power left at all to try and do anything on the slopes of the Poggio. They want to try and get there with about a 30-second advantage, but to hold on to that when the main field really starts to turn on the gas is going to be very difficult. Looking back here, you can see as well a very good spot there, Bob, of the wind. The flag is straight into the riders' faces. We were told it was going to be an easterly wind, which should have been a tailwind, but along here on the coast, that wind can certainly whip around quite a bit. Big organisation on the front. Wearing number 4 there was Martin Dinbacker of Rabobank. He's obviously looking after his team leader, number 1, Oscar Freire. Eric Decker's there. There you can see Alessandro Patacchi. There's fast Freddy Rodriguez, number 74. Looking pretty good. He's at the right end of the main field. He's just got one more climb to go, and that climb comes at 290 kilometres covered. That's the summit, and then it's 4 kilometres down to the finish line on the beautiful finish, I have to say, Bob, of the Via Roma.
One of the most glorious finishes in all of cycling, made famous perhaps by the great Eddie Merckx, who won here 7 times. Eddie Merckx was one man that was happy for the inclusion of the Poggio. He used that as a springboard to win this beautiful race on a number of occasions. He remains the biggest winner of Milan San Remo with 7 victories. Eric Zabel with 4 is no slouch himself, but look at this gap, gone up to 26 seconds. Now that is an incredible effort.
Brilliant effort as we come off the slopes of the Cipressa, now on the flat section separating the Cipressa from the Poggio. A little bit of roadworks. It's always seemed, Bob, as if when I was racing it was roadworks all along here in the Italian Riviera, and it still seems to be the case. This is the team now that has to assume responsibility. Fassa Bortolo, we've seen them do it 11 times successfully this year for Alessandro Patacchi, but never in the past has Alessandro Patacchi been able to get himself the win in the race which we have to regard as the king of classics for the sprinters, Milano San Remo.
And that looked to be Fabio Baldato from Fassa Bortolo on the front of the peloton, chasing these two men, including Paolo Bettini, the current Olympic champion. See the gold handlebar tape and the gold highlights, gold helmet, gold shoes. Wants everybody to remember just exactly who the Olympic champion is.
There's a problem at the back.
Here's the problem at the back. One of the Lotto Davide Mon riders has gone down and will probably need a bike change there, and that is incredibly bad luck. Just before that construction zone, there was a crash, and that rider went down.
Just have a look at this again to see exactly where it happened. It was very precarious going around there. You see a lot of riders had to change lines. It was just at the back on the right-hand side. I think he had to lock his brakes on just a little bit too much, and he lost contact with something and had a mechanical problem. These are the two leaders. Paolo Bettini, the Olympic champion from Athens around about 8 months ago, the final winner of the World Cup last year, and of course a former winner of Milan San Remo. That was back in 2003. At this for organisation, the gap though, Bob, despite the work on the front end of the main field by Fassa Bortolo, has gone up to 30 seconds advantage for Paolo Bettini. Well, I did not expect this at all, and I felt that Paolo Bettini today, without a victory to his name this season, was going to dedicate himself to Tom Boonen, but that is the power of Quick-Step. They are great tacticians.
Unbelievable effort being put in by Paolo Bettini. Little picture break up there. It's to be expected in Italian racing. We've seen that a lot quite often, but Bettini making an unbelievable effort. Has promised to work for his teammate. Hasn't won a race. Has even been racing, I would dare say, poorly so far this year. And I think that maybe he's been saving something special throughout the spring just for Milan San Remo, and now is streaking up the road, continuing to add to his advantage. Now it's about half a minute, about 30 seconds, and that's about what they need to stay away to the finish line when they get to the slopes of the Cipressa. 30 seconds would be an incredible advantage at the bottom, and Fassa Bortolo has not wasted one moment in chasing flat out, and they are losing time. In fact, they're not gaining any time at all on Paolo Bettini and Andrei Kashekin.
There's a nice sign for Paolo Bettini as they move in the neutral service vehicle. That's an indication that it has come up to the 30-second mark, and we're now looking, or I should think, Paolo Bettini is looking to the start of the Poggio. And a little bit of help coming to the front end of the main field for Alessandro Patacchi's Fassa Bortolo squad, because Rabobank also now have sent the orange and blue guard to the front, because they too are looking at trying to get themselves a victory with Oscar Freire. Now then, Andrei Kashekin, by the way, who's in the group with Paolo Bettini, is a very young professional. He turned professional just 2 years ago, but got himself a win at the end of last season in the Grand Prix Formi. Now, at the end of the year, Bob, if a rider performs well in September or October, it's usually an indication that he's going to ride well in the start of the following season.
Yes, there is Alejandro Valverde moving up. We can see just at the bottom of your screen there the Stars and Stripes jersey of Freddy Rodriguez. He's accustomed to racing these big events by himself, more or less, and protecting his own interests, and he's right there in the front where he needs to be. And here's Paolo Bettini, still on the breakaway, still at around about 30 seconds, doing an incredible effort. Kashekin is going to have to do something very special if he wants to even stay on the wheel of Paolo Bettini.
Well, the two leaders now will be looking next at trying to get themselves to the start of the final climb of the day, the Poggio, but I think the main field is starting to turn up the gas. Looking down at the main field, number 248 right there, Eric Zabel. If you take away the performances of Eddie Merckx, who won this race on 7 separate occasions, Eric Zabel is the next best performer here with 4 wins and 2 second places. So he, I think, today must be regarded as the man with the most experience. There's Freddy Rodriguez in the Stars and Stripes there, looking pretty good. He was second back in 2002. This looks like a little bit of a ragged organisation on the front, Bob, but they are now starting to eat into the advantage of the two leaders, Paolo Bettini and Andrei Kashekin, which at one stage was 30 seconds. But now, if we pull back, I think is probably hovering around the 15-second mark. I'm going to make a bold statement. They'll get caught before the Poggio.
They'll get caught just before or on the slopes of the Poggio, it would seem right now. The peloton has got them back in their sights. It was the whole of the Fassa Bortolo team that had to come to the front, do a big tempo. Now they're on the slopes of the Poggio. It's one of the most exciting slopes in all of cycling, and there were going to be some explosive accelerations now from the field. Fassa Bortolo going flat out. It's Patacchi that's still looking good right there, but they still have to close the gap to these two riders, Paolo Bettini, Andrei Kashekin, but I think their days are numbered on the front of the breakaway.
Around about 12 seconds now for Andrei Kashekin and Paolo Bettini. It's always amazed me, the slopes of the Poggio here. We're inside of 10 kilometers to go. It's 4 kilometers to go from the summit. It's a difficult climb, but look at Bettini. He keeps looking over his shoulders. He's trying to judge the difference between himself and the main field, because I think he would like to try and launch an attack here. He's sitting back a little bit on the wheel there of the Kazakh rider with him from Crédit Agricole. As we pull back here, it's always a nasty sign. It's always an indication that the main field is not far behind. But Bob, with this kind of a tempo being set by Fassa Bortolo, I don't really see anybody able to attack.
Absolutely, good point. Fassa Bortolo setting a brutal pace right now. One has to wonder, however, if they're not doing a little bit too much work when you think about the lead out that must come for Alessandro Patacchi to have a chance to win this event. Maybe this is what Bettini's tactic is: soften up Fassa Bortolo so Tom Boonen, his teammate, has a better chance to win the race.
Well, Bonin will be getting very nervous now, but so will all the other big sprinters like Danilo Hondo, Freddie Rodriguez, O'Grady, Valverde. Mario Cipollini is still in contact here, and if you want experience, that man certainly has experience. And then, of course, the new men on the block, Pataki, Ferreira, Boonen, and my old favourite, Eric Zabel, is still in with a very good chance. These riders here have paid all and given all of their efforts to their teammates, as we see a little move there coming from Liberty Seguros. If anybody could attack on the slopes of a climb, it would obviously have to be one of the Spanish team. Moving out. That's a very good move there, as we see Liberty Seguros in complete control at the front end. This is Angel Vicioso, and he's gone straight across that gap. And Bob, he's got to do it. He's going to hit them straight away, and there he goes.
Right straight past the former breakaway of Bettini Kashakin. Angel Vicioso, a very fast sprinter, and he has a rider, a teammate of his, Alan Davies, who's also a very good sprinter. So this is a fantastic attack by Vicioso, not usually known as a breakaway man. Had to slow down for that uphill corner. There's a replay of the attack. Vicioso going straight past the peloton. They're going to have to do a big chase now if they want to close the gap. And Vicioso is absolutely flying up the Poggio.
Good move. Nice time to hit them just at the moment when they were about to pull Paolo Bettini and Andre Kashakin back into the fold. Pelizzotti moving up there. There is Oscar Ferreira, looking very comfortable, world champion and leader of the Pro Tour. Not too far back there, 111, Alessandro Petacchi. It might not be the right moment because we're getting into the exciting part, but we've also just earlier this afternoon had the women's Milano San Remo, the Grand Prix Primavera, take place. That was won by Tracy Warrack from Germany, just ahead of Nicole Cook, the British national champion, and Anoni Wood, the leader and the new leader of the Women's World Cup. So as we're on the slopes here, back with Angel Vicioso. A good move, but Bob, I cannot believe that they're going to let Fassa Bortolo lose this one, because, you know, they are in complete control at the front end of the main field. And once you've got the chance of a man who can win the race, you're able to push yourself just that little bit more, and those are the kind of risks you have to take to go at full speed uphill.
Well, Vicioso almost coming to a stop there around that corner. Here will be the top of the climb before they start this very technical ascent back down to the coast. A couple of attacks coming on. Bad luck for Vicioso. Overcooked that corner, had to slow down a little bit. Panaria coming across now to Vicioso, who's just in front there, the first place on the road, but the peloton are right behind these two riders.
Well, coming across here from Team Panaria, this is a very good move from Paolo Tiralongo. A long turn, that means in Italian, and what he's doing now is trying to do a long turn to make himself contact with the Spanish rider from Liberty Seguros in the dark blue jersey there. But they really don't have, Bob, that much of an advantage, and they've still got around about a kilometre to go to the summit of this climb. And there it is.
There's the peloton right behind him. Cofidis in the front, T-Mobile, of course, and Panaria have been very aggressive in the finale of this bike race. Don't have a great sprinter with them, so they know they have to go in the breakaways if they're going to have a chance to win. T-Mobile now, of course, they'll be leading out their great sprinter. That is Alexander Vinokourov. They will be, he's doing an attack right now. It seems like Davide Rebellin on his wheel, along with Pelizzotti from the Liquigas squad. So it is full on now in Milano San Remo in the final moments of this last climb of the day.
Absolutely full on. The gas is turned up to maximum here as David Rebellin comes up through the inside. They still haven't broken the stranglehold of the front end of the main field. Pelizzotti there, I don't think Pelizzotti will do too much either, Bob, in a situation like this, because Mario Cipollini is still in contact, stretching it out a long way at the front end of the main field. I just caught a very slight glimpse of Kim Kirken, the champion of Luxembourg. He too is doing a very good job for his leader here this afternoon, Alessandro Petacchi. You see Rebellin there sitting up because the effort here is so violent. You can only keep the effort going for around about 50 or 60 meters, and then you're gasping for air.
Gasping for breath is right. Pelizzotti leading. Mario Cipollini, his teammate, is in the back, but Pelizzotti is taking his chance now. Rebellin on his wheel. A couple of other riders have made the juncture. Looks like Kim Kirchen as well, riding great. Absolutely fabulous right now for Fassa Bortolo, and their fast man, none other than Alessandro Petacchi.
Well, that's Kim Kirken, but it's also Mirko Celestino again there in fourth position. So he's doing a pretty good ride for himself to move up there. An impressive performance by him, and also getting up there as well. It was very interesting to see that Team Lotto have also got a man getting across the gap. And I think that could very well have been a Longines figure of Axel Merckx.
Good little gap here now to the breakaway. They're just going to go over the top in a few moments. There's the left-hand corner. This is the descent. Very technical, and they have a good gap on the peloton. It might be Valverde trying to get across there. Here's the group now. It's a very, very tricky descent. You have to be in a good position if you want to win Milano San Remo, and that's a very select group going over the top of the Poggio.
Not very many riders left as they start the descent of the Poggio, not far away from the flat section which will take them to the finish on the Via Roma.
Pelizzotti, Rebellin, Celestino, and Merckx in the breakaway with Kim Kirchen. He won't do a bit of work. He'll sit on the back in the hopes that Pataki and his teammates from Fossa Bortolo can re-catch the front riders. It was, I think, Andrei Vinokurov who put in the attack that softened the legs up, and Eric Zabel still in the group, and there's the great Mario Cipollini promising to do a good sprint on the Via Roma. He's won here before. He knows what he needs to do. Let's see how he can get it.
Well, a small group just off the front end of the main field, and will they survive? This is the group we're looking at is actually swelled to 6 riders on the first 500 meters of the descent. A rider came across the gap, and we have a feeling that man sitting at the rear end of the main field may be Alejandro Valverde. Now that would be an impressive move by him. That's Axel Merckx going around the corner. Mirko Celestino, I should say. There's been a lot of changes in the colours of the teams this season, but that is Mirko Celestino, himself an attacker earlier on. Still got a little bit of energy left in those legs to get himself off the front end of the main field. Pelizzotti in third, David Rebellin up there in second place. Well, this is a magical descent, and you know, if you can take the risks here and start the flat section with about 10 seconds advantage over the front end of the main field, you can just about hope to survive to the finish.
Well, Celestino did an incredible descent of the Cipressa just a few moments ago, and now he's putting in a very fast descent of the Poggio. Valverde sitting on the back. It's a perfect position for him to be in. If they get down to the Via Roma in the last few hundred meters, he's perhaps the fastest man in this breakaway. The peloton will be desperately chasing them, but Valverde can go from a long ways out in the sprint also. He just needs about 500 meters. If they're still just dangling off the front, give the Spaniard a great chance to win Milano San Remo. Right now, just sitting on the back of the breakaway, there you can see from Illes Baleares, that is Alejandro Valverde.
Just in front of him, that's Kim Kirchen. Now, he will not do very much at all because his man is Alessandro Petacchi. In front of Petacchi's teammate there was Axel Merckx, the tall figure there of Merckx. His father won this race on 7 occasions. I can't believe this group, as we get now into the outskirts of San Remo, are going to survive because Alessandro Petacchi's team have been all over the front end of the peloton. And Bob, in that group behind, there's a lot of pink jerseys as well of T-Mobile, the team of Eric Zabel, who's won this race on no fewer than 4 occasions.
Of course, there's Alexander Vinokurov, Zabel's teammate. Here's Tom Bonin on the wheel of Paolo Bettini, who was up the road a little bit before the Poggio, as well as the early slopes of the Poggio. Bettini wisely sitting up, waiting for his teammate Tom Bonin. Tom Bonin is going to need a fantastic lead out if he's going to win Milan San Remo, and he has perhaps the best man to do that. Paolo Bettini has won here before, knows what needs to be done. Of course, it's 3 kilometers now for our leaders to the finish line. This is going right down to the wire. What a fantastic race, and there's Rebellin going off the front with Pelizzotti.
Yeah, but Bob, the impetus has gone out of this group. You see how they've actually slowed down a fraction. It was Pelizzotti going forward there because he could feel the group slowing down a fraction. They're only about 5 seconds off the front end of the peloton. I believe once they get onto the flat section, there'll be a major organisation at the front end for the big sprinters, and they'll pull it all back together. 2 riders starting to come across. We're on the flat section now, and we're probably about 2.5 kilometers to go to the finish. Merckx now accelerating. The team bikes trying to get out of the way. It looks as if we've got Tor Hushoft has come up there as well. He's made the junction on the descent. We're now looking at an 8-man leading group, but Bob, it's all going to come back together because there's the front end of the main field.
It surely must come back together now. 2 kilometers from the finish line. All the sprinters queuing up at the front. Cipollini is there. Petacchi is there. Zabel, of course, is right there in the middle of your screen. Oscar Ferrer is still there, and all kinds of elbows being thrown. Very dangerous. Axel Merckx going off the front. Oh my goodness, that was almost a crash as everyone came back together. Now this is going to be a melee to the finish line.
A melee to the finish line it will be. They're all moving up towards the outside, trying to find the wheels of their sprinters. Alessandro Petacchi is right there. Zabaya in the yellow for his team. Saunier Duval moving up there. You can see as well Tom Boonen on his shoulder is Paolo Bettini. They're all thinking there's Eric Zabel as well, but this is a very dangerous part of the race. We're all over the main field. The fdjeux.com is on the front end, and they've got their man Matty Wilson looking over his shoulders.
Philippe Gilbert there, the rider from Française Jeux, a pretty quick rider, good finisher. Here comes Bouygues Telecom with an attack. Fossa Bortolo still controlling the race. That might be little Tommy Vogler.
Laurent Brochard, because Thomas Vogel is a French national champion. Brochard has been very good since the start of this season. He's got himself a slight gap, but the front end of the main field, inside of 1 kilometer to go, is very much controlled, Bob, by Fossa Bortolo.
And Oscar Freire is right there in the white jersey, number 1. Couple of little corners before the big, long finishing straightaway. Now this is the Via Roma, just under 1 kilometer to go. Fossa Bortolo still controlling the tempo, looking for their man, Alessandro Petacchi, to be the first time for him to win Milan San
Inside,
Remo.
Bob, the final 500 meters, and it's still very much in the control of Alessandro Petacchi and his men, but Oscar Freire now is moving up into 4th place. Paolo Bettini is up into 2nd. Moving around the outside there is Danilo Hondo's team, getting themselves organized. Boonen is right there in about 5th place. Alejandro Valverde, there's Mario Cipollini. I'm sure he's a little bit too far back, but Bettini, now having done all of that work himself, inside of 400 meters, is starting to set up the sprint. Alessandro Petacchi's not too far away. Bettini pulls off, leaves Petacchi with a long way to go. The sprint now has to go. It's slightly uphill. You can see now Danilo Hondo is looking for his man. Alessandro Petacchi's hugging the barriers on the right-hand side. He's going to get this Milan San Remo for the first time ever. The challenge is coming there on his wheel by Hondo, but can he come back? No, he cannot. And Alessandro Petacchi's get what he's dreamed about for many, many years. They've wanted this victory. Alessandro Petacchi gets himself win number 12 this season, but more importantly, Bob, he's won himself the King of Classics for the sprinters. Congratulated there by Alejandro Valverde. What a great job for the team. This man is now most certainly the fastest finisher in the world.
Unbelievable sprint. He had about 400 meters by himself at the front of the bike race. He was able to do it all the way to the finish line. What an incredible sprint put in by Alessandro Petacchi, the Fossa Bortolo rider. They control the whole finale of the bike race. A very deserving win by the team, and of course the fastest man in sprinting today, Alessandro Petacchi. What a great win for the Italians and him himself. He's wanted to win this race since he started as a professional, and now he's finally done it.
Bob, I have to giggle a little bit because just looking down there at the chaos of the finish line, this is Italy, isn't it? The Milan San Remo finish is always like there. The Italians trying to get in there and get an interview live on the line. But I think for Petacchi, this is a very emotional moment. Congratulations coming from the team. A great job by his teammates, because the work that they had to do from the Capomelle right the way through to the finish, and they were still able to sort it out. He wanted that so badly, and this is a moment, I think, of true emotion for the Italians.
Well, you can see how much this race means to the Italian cyclists. I don't think we've ever seen Petacchi happier at the finish line. I'm sure he would trade all 11 wins he's had so far this season for this one win here at Milano San Remo. What an incredible day for Italian cycling and Alessandro Petacchi.
Well, you have to say that's absolutely true. This race is very dear to the heart of the Italians, and through history, about 50% of the winners of this event have been Italian. Look at that little bit of argy-bargy there. Oscar Freire and Eric Zabel trying to sort it out. Let's have a look at this. Just look at the power now of the way this man accelerates once he's got a sniff of a victory. He goes into some kind of overdrive. You can see just battling out there to try and get himself a place on the podium. Thor Hushovd, he has to be happy there with 3rd. Freire, I think, just getting 4th place on the line. Eric Zabel fading a little bit, but probably finishing in the top 10. But this is the chaos, the glory, and the emotion of Italy, and the win in Milan San Remo of Alessandro Petacchi.
Big hug from Matteo Tosato there, who did an incredible amount of work earlier in the bike race. There is Petacchi. He's overcome with emotion. I think he's crying there just before we're going to get a word from him, hopefully. There is Kim Kirchen, who did such a great finale, controlling the bike race over the slopes of the Poggio and doing a great lead out. Petacchi had to go from a long ways out, but look how happy the Fossa Bortolo riders are.
Well, look at this. This man is very much like the Mario Cipollini of old. He looks over his shoulder to judge just when he has to make that incredible effort. This is the second time he's looked over his shoulder. He knows he's got the win very much in sight here. He has incredible power and acceleration. He gets that win, as nearly all of his wins, Bob, over the last 3 years, so easily, so emphatically. No challenge at all coming from any quarter.
A great, deserving win by Petacchi. Thor Hushovd in 3rd. Danilo Hondo looks like 2nd place. Stuart O'Grady there, sneaking into 4th, and I think it was Oscar Freire, the current leader of the Pro Tour, in 5th place. Very select group. You can see 5 or 6 Fossa Bortolo riders are still left in the front, and there's only 1 or 2 of any other team, and that's an incredible result. They came to this race, Petacchi racing very well throughout the year, knew what they had to do, and that's when you have the fastest man delivered to the finish line. A win for Fassa Bortolo and Alessandro Patacchi.
Well, another look here at the acceleration of Alessandro Patacchi coming up to the line, right on his wheel there. Danilo Hondo, Philippe Gilbert of France, Tom Boonen not getting himself the win. A little bit of disappointment on the young rider's face, but he's got many, many more years to come and a few more chances at this. Well, Alessandro Patacchi has had 11 victories so far this season before this one, but I think, as Bob said earlier, he would swap all of the wins so far for the one that he's got here on the Via Roma, the home of the sprinters, Milan San Remo. Alessandro Patacchi getting himself a very magical victory.
Absolutely fabulous win by the Italian. On the Italian team, such an important event for them throughout the whole year. I think that if you can win Milano San Remo, you have made your budget for the whole season as far as the team's concerned. Patacchi, I'm sure, expects to win some more races throughout the year, but I think this will be his favorite one of the whole season.
Yeah, but Bob, that man is unbelievable. I can't believe that we're only 6 weeks into the season. He's already got himself 12 wins. And if you're looking for the top three, Alessandro Patacchi now being joined by a very rapid finisher, Danilo Hondo, and despite some rough riding down towards the finish, Thor Hushovd, the Norwegian national champion, getting himself third.
Incredibly hectic finale. A lot of pushing and shoving going on, even headbutting between Zabel and Oscar Freire, giving this man, Alessandro Patacchi, the chance to win. You can take nothing away from his team, however. They controlled the race. They knew what they had to do. Deliver Patacchi to the finale in good order, and they did just that. Patacchi comes out the winner of Milano San Remo. What a great day of racing it was.